and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson, and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hey, I am DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, we're talking about Last Stop, Golf Club Wasteland, and World Flipper.
World Flipper. Get excited. Everyone loves the World Flipper.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Well, some people love the World Flipper.
I don't dislike the World Flipper. I just don't know the World Flipper.
Okay. Well, today's your day.
Cool.
Today's your lucky day, that is.
Maybe my opinion will change by the end of this episode.
Yeah, you never know. Feeling optimistic.
I'm all about learning about cool new games, DJ. I certainly don't have enough to play.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. I know you're always just like, what weird mobile games are out there that I could be playing? Well, have I got a game for you?
Excellent. I had that exact experience, and it probably is what you're referring to, but about 2 weeks ago, I had a 5-night stint in a hotel in Pittsburgh, which is about 3 hours away from my home in Harrisburg. And I got about 2.5 hours into that ride when I realized that I forgot to bring my Switch.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And it was going to be 4 days without being able to, play Switch games or check on my Animal Crossing island, which would had been the longest amount of time ever away from it in the year plus it's been out.
I was going to ask, what do you do in that situation? Like, have you missed a day?
I've never missed a day until I went on this trip and forgot my Switch.
Wow.
Yeah. So my record has been tarnished, but I did have a serious moment where I sort of like, well, if I turn around, it's 3 hours back. If I drive back after that, it's another 3 hours. I'd get back to the hotel by midnight. Like this whole plan just to go retrieve my Switch and then talk myself out of it because that's dumb and I'm an adult.
Yeah. Well, plus it was nobody's birthday the next day, so you weren't disappointing anyone.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then I had what if I went to Best Buy? I could just buy another Switch. Could I somehow get my island onto a new Switch? Because, again, I'm an adult. I can buy a Switch whenever I want to. And, again, talk myself out of that as well because, I was there for work. It wasn't like I was going to sit in the hotel room for 24 hours a day and just play video games.
But,
I had things to do.
Animal Crossing.
Right, Animal Crossing. So no, I didn't do anything. I did not play Animal Crossing or anything else on my Switch for 4+ days, and then
just laid on the bed and twiddled your thumbs.
Right. Well, posted to the Discord saying, "What mobile game should I play?" I don't think I got any good suggestions. I mean, I got suggestions, but there was nothing that I hadn't, tried already.
They were beneath you.
I got terrible suggestions from our Discord community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they came home
on notice.
Anxiously fired up the Switch and went, "Oh, let's see what a disaster my island is." And it was like not a moment had gone by. Everybody was like, "Oh, it's Randy again."
It's like, you were gone?
Yeah, right, exactly. How can I miss you if you don't go away? Yeah. It was not the train wreck I thought it was going to be. The whole island was not covered in cockroaches and weeds. Nobody had moved away. I remember saying out loud as I powered up the Switch to Sarah, my girlfriend, if someone has moved away, I really will just throw this thing out the window. But fortunately, no one moved away, so I didn't have to throw my device out the window.
That's good. It's a bit extreme.
It's a little, yeah, but I have a very carefully curated sort of collection of animals on my island, and it's a delicate balance. If one moves away, the whole thing's thrown off, and I just couldn't deal. Yeah,
get some elephant moving in or something,
right? Or an aardvark or something horrible like that. So I just couldn't possibly deal with the rando that would move in his place. Yeah.
Oh well, glad that worked out.
Yeah. Crisis averted.
If only you had known about World Flipper back then. Well, that was several weeks ago, right? So that was it was in a pre-World Flipper world.
Is this a recent release?
It's been out for a while in Japan, but it just came out internationally.
No, I was in Pittsburgh, DJ, not Japan.
Right. Well, still out of luck.
I mean, it's almost the same thing, but...
I mean, it's like, yeah, I forgot my Switch, but fortunately, I was in Japan, so just downloaded this fancy mobile game.
There's just Switches everywhere. You just open any random drawer in a hotel room, and there's bound to be a Switch or two in there.
Yeah, provided by the Gideons.
Right, exactly. With like a chain on it, like attached to the table, like at the bank. Yeah.
Whatever the Japanese equivalent is. They're just
of the Gideons, yeah.
putting switches in those nightstands. It's great.
Excellent. I would stay at that hotel all the time.
Oh, yeah. We'll love it.
Atari is opening a hotel and casino in Las Vegas.
What?
It's not Atari in the way that we know it. It's whatever company bought the rights to the name and the logo Atari.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's basically the story behind every Atari thing for the last however many years.
Kind of traded hands a number of times, but yeah, they're opening a giant kind of Atari video gamey themed techie hotel casino somewhere in Vegas.
What? Like on the Strip?
I don't know if it's on the Strip. I'm not sure. But it's there's mock-ups of what it's supposed to look like. I don't know if construction's actually happening. Like anything Nintendo, Atari, it's probably not. But they have like merch on their website you can buy that's sort of like the Atari Hotel coming to Las Vegas. Yeah.
What do gamers love more than Las Vegas casino?
That might be neat.
With Atari branding. That's weird. I've never heard about that.
Yeah. Let's do a little Google foo after the podcast. But maybe a Nintendo hotel casino would not be so far removed. I was
thinking, I guess they're trying to beat Nintendo to the punch, because it seems like if anybody is going to have the clout to get gamers to make a reservation for their hotel, it'll be Nintendo, right?
Right.
But they're busy with like Super Nintendo World or whatever it is over in Japan.
Right. And the Mario movie.
So Atari is like, well, no video game hotel in Las Vegas yet. This is our moment. Let's do it. Let's get in there.
Nintendo's busy making video games. Atari's busy making hotels.
Maybe they can partner up with Konami. I hear they've already got quite a beachhead established there.
Yeah, most casino games are Konami. I don't know if that's true, but a lot of casino games are Konami.
I was going to say most Konami games are casino games at this point. Works both ways.
I can't vouch for that, but I'll take your word for it. But yeah.
Did you make a reservation? Hangover. Did you make or get your Atari hotel shirt?
I was going to say, it's Video Game Hangover official meetup September 2022 at the Atari Hotel.
I keep saying one of these years we're going to do Drunktacular live in Vegas. So as soon as that hotel opens, I guess we know what we have to do.
We found our spot, yeah. No, yeah. I have not made a reservation, didn't buy any merch. They do have a couple of cool shirts and stuff like that, but I have an old Atari t-shirt that I like that has the logo on it.
That doesn't say hotel on it?
That doesn't say hotel. It just says Atari in cool letters. Yeah. Inevitably, I'll wear it to like the grocery store, and some equally old person will go, I like that shirt, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will nod knowingly in his direction.
Mm-hmm. I'm just imagining one of those Atari shirts, except instead of Atari, it just says hotel on it. It's like, what? I don't get it. Please explain.
Just in the Atari font. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What's the Atari hotel? My shirt's raising a lot of questions, already answered by my Atari hotel shirt.
And we've teased World Flipper. I mean, do you want to start with that? Let's start with World Flipper.
Let's start with World Flipper.
Explain yourself.
Oh, man. World Flipper is the hot new gacha game from Cygames, the makers of Dragalia Lost and Grand Blue.
Oh, wow.
I mean, technically not new, I guess, because as we were saying, it's been out for a couple of years, Japan. But it's here now, and you can play it.
Cool.
It's a pinball game, basically.
And thus the flipper part.
That's where the flipper comes in. But, sort of in contrast to all these other gacha games that are like, I feel like most of them, or most of the ones I played anyway, are some flavor of RPG, whether it's turn-based or, action game. They're all kind of like you manage a little party of guys and they level up. Well, I guess, when I describe it that way, this is also an RPG, because it has all those same things, except instead of swinging a sword around, you're playing pinball. But just to set the stage, World Flipper starts off with you controlling this party of like these super cool looking, sort of Final Fantasy looking heroes as they battle with just the most generic looking guy. I think his name is actually, it's either the Dark Lord, or I have it in my notes here somewhere. It's the Lord of Shadow. It's like, okay, all right. I think I've heard of that guy. But anyway, you start out as these super cool heroes. They look like they've already like done it. They look like they're in the last dungeon of the game. They're about to face off with this guy. And they do, by fighting this little pinball battle against him. But just as they're about to beat him, the Lord of Shadow does some like special attack on the main guy, and he like loses all his powers, and he gets turned into like some kind of Pokemon fox dog thing. And he just gets like catapulted off to another world, and he meets these other two characters who you play as in the game. They're like the like self-insert protagonists. And he's just stuck with them, and it kind of turns into like pinball quantum leap at that point, where he has to use this interdimensional device called the World Flipper to send him off to another world in this pinball universe, in the hopes that the Lord of Shadow will be there.
I was saying, the hopes that the next leap is the one home.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. It's a very old reference for our listeners. If you might want to look that up, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very, very old TV show.
It was a deep pull, yeah.
But from there, you just use this world flipper to go around playing pinball on these various worlds, which, you know, they're kind of themed like you would find worlds in a Mario game. Like you go to sort of the fantasy forest world, and then there's the desert world, and then there's the pirate world, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
So it's all very silly, and just an excuse for you to, you know, kind of traipse around the galaxy playing pinball in all these fantastic environments. But as I was saying, instead of doing these RPG battles, you essentially just play pinball. So the basic setup is each world you go to is divided up into a bunch of like smaller stages, which are essentially all pinball tables. And you have your party of 3 characters, and they get dropped onto the table, and they themselves are the pinballs. And they're all connected together like you have a little train of 3 pinballs, I guess. And from there, you just use the flippers to bounce them onto whatever's on the table, whether it's enemies or if there are like obstacles you can break to like unlock power-ups, or just sort of clear a space on the playfield to make your life a little easier. Each party member has all these skills. Well, actually, they have like one major skill that they can activate.
Gotcha.
Which are usually some kind of attack. But I think they can also heal you or like buff your different stats and that sort of thing. But in order to charge these up, what you need to do is just try and hit as many enemies as possible without your party kind of falling back down to the bumpers. And to help you do that, you can periodically do a little dash move. So every few seconds, you tap the screen, and your lead party member will dash over to the closest enemy or object that they're kind of bouncing around. So it's a little different than just a typical pinball game, where I feel like you just spend a lot of time like watching the ball, but also just waiting for it to fall all the way back down to the flippers. In this, you kind of have to keep your eye on it and look for chances to use a little dash move and keep your combo alive, so you can build up your skills, because those are really helpful. Eventually, after you clear enough enemies, you move on to the boss of that area. And the boss battles so far have been really interesting. So in the first area of each stage, you're just kind of hitting the ball around to clear out all the enemies. But with the bosses, you really have to pay more attention. And to some degree, just learn their attack patterns, because they'll be at the top of the screen shooting like a bunch of fireballs or lasers or whatever at you. And you have to, be strategic about how you move the ball around the field, so you can avoid their attacks, because you don't want to take too much damage. You also have to watch out, because eventually the boss will start charging up their big attack. And at that point, they get a little glowing target on them, and you have to do your dash move and hit them in that little glowing spot to interrupt the move. Otherwise, they do this huge attack, and it's like usually pretty difficult to avoid, and does a lot of damage, so generally bad. Mm-hmm. So it actually ends up being fairly action-based, and like maybe a little more frantic than even a typical pinball game.
It sounds very much like they sort of started with the skeleton of a action RPG, and then sort of like backwalked it to to a pinball game. Like tried to sort of like, okay, how do we represent the party? How do we represent a boss battle? How do we, and just sort of like kind of retrofit pinball into it. That's kind of an interesting approach rather than sort of starting with pinball and turning it into an RPG.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, what if instead of jumping and like swinging a sword, all you could do is like hit these flippers and like switch from there. And it actually works out pretty well.
Cool.
It's very different from what I was expecting, which was probably more the other approach, which would be to just design a pinball table and then like cram RPG mechanics into it. But
right.
It's interesting the way they've done it.
Where does the gotcha element of it come in?
Well, so you have your party members, and as always, you can summon for more party members. So that's really it. You just earn currency as you're playing, and you can summon for more party members. Each party member has they got their special skills, but they've also got like an element assigned to them, and certain elements are stronger against other elements. So occasionally you run into bosses that maybe you'll have a slight advantage if you use the correct element to go with their elemental alignment and all that stuff. And that is honestly where the game starts to lose me a little bit, because like I like the pinball stuff. The pinball gameplay is actually pretty fun. But just like logging into this game for the first time and seeing like, okay, you've got, the currency thing up at the top with the gems in it, and you've got the stamina meter, and here are all your party members. Here's all the different ways you have to level them up. Here's all their equipment, which you also have to level up. It's just, oh my god, we're just doing this again. Like, I'm still playing Dragalia pretty frequently, but like I've already spent so much time just learning how all the systems work in that game and just sort of understanding the upgrade paths for everything. Just getting dumped into a new one of these just feels like, oh man, do this all over again.
Right.
So I feel like it's fun. Like the pinball stuff is fun. I don't know if I have just the brain space to play a second game like this. This is like as much as I'm enjoying it.
Which is very much my sort of take on Genshin Impact was, that game is a very much sort of in the vein of a giant open world exploration a la sort of Skyrim or Breath of the Wild, and layer on top of that all of the trappings of mobile games and gacha games and various forms of currency and random things that happen and et cetera, et cetera. And it was like, I have these games in my brain already. I've played games like this, and I don't know that I have room in my, life, heart, brain for another one that sort of apes all of those conventions one more time. So yeah, once it sort of got to its kind of third form of currency and random unlockable and daily check-in bonuses, and I was like, nope, I think I'm out of this. Yeah, that's enough.
It's a lot to keep up with. Yeah,
it's a lot. Yeah, and it's a cool game. It's a beautiful game. It's surprisingly well made for kind of the model that it operates under. But it just that's a big commitment. I can't make that kind of commitment to another video game.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like maybe I would enjoy the pinball stuff more than I enjoy like the combat in Dragalia Lost. Who knows? Maybe This is the gacha game I should be playing, because there are just so many of these. There's like so many different flavors of just like this style of game. I can't even tell at this point whether like is the pinball the game or is like the gacha stuff the game, because like I've talked before about how I really enjoy like the team management stuff in Dragalia. In fact, I play most of that game with auto battle on, so I'm like not even really doing the battles a lot of the time. I'm just like turning dials on my party members and like putting different like power ups on them to see if they work better. So I feel like at some point, is that just the game that people are going after? Should I be looking more? Should I be looking forwards to playing like the team management aspects in World Flipper rather than the pinball game? Because this one also has an auto play mode, which I haven't tried yet. But it seems weird. Like pinball seems so simple. Why would you need a computer to do it for you?
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe it'll just get to the point where I am, I've done this this boss battle 100 times. I don't need to do it 101 times. I'll just have the computer do it and grind out like resources for me.
Oh. Yeah, it's probably where the auto battle comes in, is just for those repeat grinds.
Yeah, but that's the point where I'm just like, oh man, I'm already doing this in Dragalia, or I already have done this. I can't
just
imagine.
Play the game.
Yeah, just doing this all again, getting my teams up to the same point where they are in this other game.
And you're still playing Dragalia pretty consistently?
Yeah, I check on it. I don't play it like as much every day as I used to, but I still check in on it pretty regularly, just to to get the numbers to go ever so slightly higher.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The big 3rd anniversary is coming up. That's going to be exciting.
Oh. So your need for that type of game in your life is probably being met by Dragalia.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm as I was saying, I don't know how committed I am to just the gameplay in Dragalia. Like, maybe I would prefer to play a pinball version of this, but it's just I've already put so much into just building up my team to this point that
you just can't walk away from it. Yeah,
it would be difficult. I'd have to really think about it. I have to be really sure like World Flipper was going to be the new thing.
Yeah, if you just want to play a pinball game that exists out there, you could go to a place and play pinball. Or I'm sure there's, I can think of some video game versions of pinball that are actually quite good and playable. So, yeah.
I mean, I could just keep playing World Flipper because it's free. I just probably would not get as intense into it as I did with Dragalia. Actually, this is the thing that really sort of like was a red flag to me. Like in Dragalia Lost and Genshin Impact and other similar games, you typically have like the element wheel where, one element beats another one. I was just describing that as it worked in World Flipper. In Dragalia, you have these 5 elements. And in the very early days of that game, I was just like, okay, so what's the strategy here? So obviously it's going to be tough to build up 5 elemental teams. Like, you should really focus on one. Or maybe you build one team, like you build a really strong fire team, and you just don't have great teams in all the other elements. Or maybe like you have a couple really strong characters that are different elements, so you put them all in the same team, and you have this weird mixed element team. Like, which one is the correct answer? Then I eventually realized, the correct answer, if you want to do well at this game, is you just build a very strong team in all 5 elements, and it's very time-consuming, and takes a lot of effort and energy to maintain something like that, where like all 5 of your teams are viable. But that's like kind of the hardcore approach. But just getting into World Flipper, I'm like, oh my god, they've got the elements again. And this time, so they don't have just the standard 5 elements. They've just arbitrarily added a 6th one. And I was just like, okay, guys, that's enough. Like, managing 5 teams.
Elements.
Yeah. Like, it's a handful to like level up 5 teams worth of guys, or 5 elements worth of teams, or whatever, however you want to break it down. Just adding in a 6th one, that's just like, 20% or whatever more effort that you have to put into this game to just, keep up with all the bosses that are coming at you. So
yeah,
I feel like, I don't know if it's balanced in sort of like the player's favor in other areas, or it's just more that you have to keep up with. But already I was just like seeing this 6th element and feeling exhausted. So I don't know. I'll probably play it for another week, because typically when one of these games comes out, there's like maybe a week's worth of like story that they put out at launch, and maybe I'll get a better idea of how sort of the end game shapes up. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be doing like World Flipper raids or anything a few months down the road.
Does it have a multiplayer component like Dragalia?
Yeah, there's like multiplayer boss battles, which I honestly haven't even tried yet, just because I'm like, that I don't know if I want to get into that. But
yeah,
it does. Yeah, there's more for people to get into if they really like sort of the online multiplayer component. I imagine it just like tosses tosses your pinball onto somebody else's table as they're fighting a boss, but who knows? But anyway,
that's unique. That is this whole package is maybe this is the grand resurgence of pinball or something like that as a video game component. Who knows? But it's a weird flex.
I really it's a fun concept. I don't have any pinball games on my phone, so it's just like something different to do. Like I was saying, the pinball tables are pretty fun. The characters are they have very fun designs, very colorful. It's actually, it's like the look of the tables is all pixel art, which is kind of surprising. It's like it's not 3D or anything. And because all of the characters have to just be a little tiny pinball on the table, their pixel art is just incredibly like squatty, and like they have this huge head, and their legs and like their entire body are like 4 pixels tall underneath their head. So it looks hilarious. Like just looking at the party screen and seeing all these weird looking little pixel characters is amazing. So I really enjoy it, like aesthetically and just like the basic gameplay of it as well. I just don't know how. I don't think it's going to become like my new thing. Right. I don't know if Dragalia is going anywhere.
Good. I mean, you have a thing. Do you need?
I have my thing. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I'm waiting for something else to just blow me away and be like, well, just throw Dragalia Lost in the trash at this point. But who knows what that game is?
Have you played Yoku's Island Express?
I have not. No, I know you're quite fond of it.
I'm a big fan of that game. It is, for the sake of our listeners and maybe for you, DJ, it's a Metroidvania. It's kind of a 2D platformer, very heavily sort of exploration based, but in it you are a little dung beetle, rolling around a ball, a pinball. And
it's a pinball mania.
A pinball, yeah, and you sort of like roll it into sort of naturally occurring pinball tables, essentially, that sort of land in the environment, made up of twigs and parts of the architecture and parts of buildings and things like that. And you're a mailman. Your task is to deliver the mail, so you use the little pinball sort of in your defense. If you encounter enemies or a big spider or something like that, you play kind of pinball against them to gain passage to be able to deliver the mail. So it's kind of this cute mixture of really unique kind of elements like pinball and Metroidvania structuring, and it's a little bit of a social game too, where you're kind of meeting villagers and talking to people and stuff like that. So it kind of pushes all of my buttons in a very very obvious way, I think. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that game. Yoku's Island Express, would highly recommend.
Yeah, I don't know if I need that much pinball in my life.
Yeah,
like I like being able to just drop in and do a couple tables every once in a while. Maybe do some summons if the game is feeling generous.
No summons. It's Yoku, kind of, yeah.
Oh well, what if
you're out?
Well, no, I mean I'm not attached to the summons that way. I'm just saying it's got them. But no, it's been in the back of my mind while I was playing this. I was just like, well, how much do I enjoy pinball? Do I need like an entire Metroid's worth of pinball?
Did you ever play House of the Dead pinball on the
I did not. I played a lot of Metroid pinball. Metroid Prime pinball, whatever that was.
Oh, I played that too. That's a good game, yeah. See, there's a long and storied history of people trying to sort of reverse engineer pinball into other games, yeah.
Kirby's Pinball Land, my all-time favorite. That's quite old at this point, though.
Yeah, I didn't get to that one. Cool. Well, that's a surprising discovery. I was prepared to poo-poo this, but now I'm kind of intrigued.
I think, like, if you're going to play any gacha game, I mean, I guess you'd play Genshin Impact or whatever. But,
probably,
yeah. This one's pretty fun. It's very breezy. It's a lot of, like, anime characters screaming in Japanese, which I'm not sure you'd be into. But you can turn the voices off.
I'm out.
But it's got Pokemon in it. What else do you need?
Boy, collect them all.
Yeah. There are just some systems in this game. Like you can assign secondary characters, many of which are sort of like little Pokemon monsters who you meet to your characters as boosts. And like if you get really into it, I guess you can optimize all of them and give them equipment. And I'm just like, no, I don't need to do that. I'm just gonna see if I make it through a week of this game before I start like min-maxing my team. But it does seem like, if you really decide to commit to this thing, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to commit to.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Anyway, World Flipper. It's weird.
What's also weird is this game that I've been playing is Golf Club Wasteland.
Another golf game. How many golf games is that this year?
So many. Lots of golf games.
I feel like every other week it's like, oh, I found another one.
Yeah. Man, there's just so many of them. I don't know why I feel compelled to play them all, but there are not a lot of sports I'm good at, and there's sort of golf can be sort of distilled enough down into like basic mechanics that I think I find something about kind of the repetition and the kind of modest challenge of it kind of appealing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I do like the sort of like minimalism of it.
Yeah. In the sense of what you call it, desert golf, which we've talked about a lot on this show, and its sequel to a lesser degree, Golf on Mars. But I think sort of Golf Club Wasteland is sort of that stripe, where it really kind of has a very lean kind of approach to golf, in that the whole thing is essentially controlled with the left stick. And I'll describe the game sort of in better detail after describing how you play golf on it, but you just move the stick kind of in the general direction that you want to shoot the ball, and the further you kind of push the stick, the harder you push the stick to its limit, the more kind of energy or power you put into the shot.
Well, you're pushing the stick, you're not pulling it back.
Correct, yeah. So I guess that's where it's sort of the distinction to comparing it to desert golf.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, that's absurd. That's not how you play golf.
I wish it controlled like desert golf, because I felt like I had more power in desert golf and sort of control over where that ball was going to go. The issue with Golf Club Wasteland is that I'm playing it on my Switch Lite, and those sticks don't travel very far. Like, they're little, kind of squatty, kind of nubby, kind of little sticks. And I've tried to play with the sensitivity just to try to get it right, but I feel like just even kind of moving them a hair does it puts a little more pepper on the ball than I would like. So I end up flubbing, particularly putts. I end up flubbing a lot of putts because I either hit them too short or way too hard. I can't seem to, after I think I've played 40 holes of this thing now, and I've sort of hit the end credits. I can't quite kind of figure out where the sweet spot is for, a modestly distanced putt with the right amount of power behind it. I always sort of screw up my kind of stroke game at the end there.
You know what you need is one of those like hardcore FPS attachments that they were selling like during the PS3 era. You could like attach them onto your analog sticks, and they'd be either like this giant cover for the stick or like a really tall like extension, like almost like an arcade joystick,
just to make it a little more sticky.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, sticky, exactly. So you just have the extra degrees of precision.
Right. Yeah. Probably that this game would benefit from me having that thing, but I don't have that thing, and I'm probably not going to buy one to play Golf Club Wasteland.
Oh man. Well, I mean, just think of like how many more golf games you're going to play on this thing.
I don't know. We'll see. Who knows what the balance of 2021 holds for me?
Yeah,
but
like probably at least one more. Just at least extrapolating.
I'm sure if I spent a minute on Google, I could probably find one or two. So the hook here is that it's the not too distant future. Earth is a wasteland, as the title would suggest. There has been an ecological disaster. And the 1% of the 1%ers who could afford to quickly got on spaceships and got off planet and now live on Mars.
Okay.
Those rich people occasionally travel back to Earth to play some golf, because what is left of Earth has been set up as a massive, sprawling golf course.
Okay. All right. So they had the same experience that I did. They didn't like golf on Mars as much as desert golfing.
Right, exactly. So they came back to Earth to do some golf, and so you have a little jetpack, you have a bubble helmet, and a spacesuit, and you don't have control over this. Your little guy kind of floats down and lands next to the ball. You do the thing I mentioned with the stick to shoot it in the direction of the pin, and lather, rinse, repeat. The courses, the holes themselves sort of play out across kind of rooftops of skyscrapers, through kind of the ruins of parks, through a subway system, et cetera. So you're essentially sort of making your way, it feels like kind of across a city, sort of a nondescript, non-specific city somewhere on the planet of Earth, while you're basically playing golf on the ruins of the city. It's kind of a cool hook. It's it's a lot of window dressing, and the developers go to a lot of length to kind of fill in the background to kind of tell the story. In fact, when you finish the game, it unlocks a little comic book about your main character that you can kind of flip through on pages that sort of talks about his journey off of Earth to Mars and then back to play golf. You get some narration from people who are still left on Earth who are watching this rich dude play golf now in their home. You have a radio station that you can listen to, and I highly encourage people to turn up the volume if you're playing Golf Club Wasteland. Listen to Mars radio beaming into your little helmet. And it is sort of people who have gotten off of Earth talking about how badly they miss Earth and how horrible life on Mars is, and that they've made a giant mistake and wish they could go home.
Earth is a wasteland. It's worse than that up on Mars.
Yeah, apparently. Well, you get a lot of color. You get a lot of like reminders about the importance of rationing and how to sort your garbage appropriately, and not to go outside the airlock for too long. And there's a lot of like social engineering stuff that you hear about too, where you're like, project leaders are not to play card or board games with their employees until further notice. So there's like a lot of weird, like political intrigue, maybe kind of told through some of the stories on the radio station. So again,
it's surprisingly heavy for a just golf game.
Right, exactly. But it's super compelling. I find myself, those kind of NPR moments where I don't know, maybe you've had this experience where you kind of pull into your driveway, but you're not quite at the end of some NPR news story that you're really kind of into. So you sit in your driveway, you sit in your garage, and you listen to it play out. I find myself sort of at the end of holes of Golf Club Wasteland, just kind of listening to the radio before pushing the button to move on to the next thing, because there's a DJ who sort of does little news fills and interviews people and stuff like that. You have callers who call in and talk about kind of life on Mars and stuff like that. And then they play songs. They play a whole soundtrack of original music in varying styles and stuff like that. So you get a little pop music, a little electro music, stuff like that. And it's all kind of faintly European, kind of Europop. But it's super entertaining. And again, a level of detail that this game totally doesn't need, but I think is stronger for having.
That's so weird. Yeah. I wonder if it was like they wanted to make some, I don't know what kind of game, but some like a little more involved game with this kind of dystopian atmosphere and all this intrigue. And then they realized, we only have the budget or the resources to make a golf game, so got to get that radio station in there somehow, though.
Yeah, maybe they had recorded all the assets for some bigger game and repurposed them for golf.
This was supposed to be Half-Life 3, but they couldn't devote all the manpower.
It's a very pretty golf game. It's a minimalist in sort of gameplay only, but like environments are pretty detailed, and there's a lot of like weather effects, and you can sort of take advantage of some of that stuff. There's sort of leaves blow by on a current of air. You can kind of like time your ball so that it goes up into the air current and you get a little extra lift off of it. There otherwise isn't a like weather impact, or you can't really kind of curve the ball or anything like that. It's not to that level of degree, but there are occasionally little kind of environmental things like that you can take advantage of. So it's it's this weird sort of combination of just really kind of pure and simplistic kind of golf controls with a lot of really kind of elaborate and kind of intriguing and interesting kind of window dressing behind it. So I kind of dig it. I wish I was playing it with a better controller. I don't think the Switch Lite is the way to go with this thing, and that has led to a lot of frustration. But I have found that it's super easy to just go into the menu and go reset hole, and you can start back from scratch. And nice. undo all of the mistakes that you made. There's 3 modes in this, which I kind of dig as well. The first is you just kind of play through it, and it kind of tells the story. And if you kind of like finish the holes on a relatively low par, you get a little diary entries from your golfer. His name is Charlie. Sort of talking about his life and how he ended up on Mars and stuff like that. That would then lead you to a second playthrough where you have a par for every hole. You are trying to sort of get the ball into the cup, essentially, within a set number of strokes, just to give you a little goal, a little destination, a little additional challenge. There's a third mode that then unlocks called Iron Mode, where if you don't hit the par, you fail out.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. So presumably you are an expert Wasteland golfer at that point and are up for that challenge. I'm not there. I probably won't play it through that mode. It doesn't sound like my kind of fun.
Yeah,
but
golf permadeath.
Yeah, I like that it doesn't, at least in those early modes, doesn't have pretty minimalistic UI. Doesn't have like a ticker up in the corner that tells you how many strokes you've taken thus far. You actually have to go into a menu and then into another menu on that first mode to sort of see how many strokes you've taken thus far. It kind of hides that information, so you don't stress over it. You just sort of whack away at the ball and kind of enjoy yourself listening to the radio. But if you want to be the kind of person who is like, oh, this is a par 3, I only have 3 shots, they're much longer holes, so there really aren't a lot of par 3s. There's like a par 27 I found. So they're pretty expansive. But it's, it's kind of a fun, entertaining little diversion. It's this little $10 on the eShop, and not a huge financial venture. And I've gotten quite a few hours of entertainment out of it. So if any of this sounds intriguing to you, would recommend.
I was just thinking, it must be such an amazing realization when you decide that your game could support like one of those Iron Man modes. Because I always think of like XCOM or Diablo, where they have that mode where it's like the regular game, but if you die, that's it.
Yep.
And it just seems like, relatively speaking, it's kind of a minimal effort mode to add to your game. You just be like, well, you can't revive at the camp or whatever. But just by adding in the one little difference, you generate hundreds and thousands of extra hours of gameplay for everybody who's checking out your game, because they're just like bashing their heads against Iron Man mode for like the rest of the year. Sure,
if you're the type of gamer who is susceptible to that, I'm probably not. I don't think I'm the type of guy who's going to line up for Iron Man golf, but I'm sort of flashing back to a couple of the holes here. There's one that sort of is across a sort of a series of rooftops in a city. So you have the space between the buildings, which is just an unlimited drop. You have like window washers that are kind of half hanging off the sides of buildings, so you can kind of land your ball, if you're smart and play well, with some precision kind of on the window washer. But it could easily roll off the side of that if you hit it a little too hard or something. So yeah, there's a lot of, just in that level alone, I can think of like 8 or 9 places where your ball could roll off the side and it would be game over for you.
That's it. So you don't get the ball back. Wow.
I don't believe so. I've not gotten to Iron Mode. I've just read the sort of description of it in the menu. I'm left to believe that is exactly what happens.
That's intense. I don't think I'd be up for that.
So I don't. And again, I apologize to the developers if I misconstrued what the intent of the Iron Mode in that is, because again, not quite to that point in the game. But it does not sound like fun to me. So that said, the first 2 modes, the kind of the par list, just kind of like free mode essentially, and then kind of playing against the par challenges is kind of fun and compelling. I don't know if I'm the guy who's going to go for Iron Mode golf.
How long does it take you to get through the normal game? Like a few hours?
A couple hours. I probably put 4 hours into it.
Okay. I mean,
yeah.
That's not too unreasonable. Just, do a couple iron attempts once in a while. You get up to the, 3rd hour and 55 minutes and lose your ball in a water hazard or whatever to start over.
Yeah. Well, like I said, some of these holes are very high par. This, there was a 27 that I found. There was a somewhere in the teens, 18, 19. the one that's in the 20s, let's say 27, I think I ended that hole with like 52 strokes or something like that.
Oh.
So like, I was double par at worst on that hole. So yeah, it would definitely require me being a much better golfer to make any progress in iron mode.
You could get that stick attachment.
Right.
What do you get out of finishing it? Is it just your satisfaction?
You get kind of a cute little animation that kind of wraps up the story a little bit to that point. You also, like I said, in the first playthrough, you unlock that comic book that kind of tells Charlie's kind of origin story.
Oh, no, but I mean, is there a separate reward for finishing iron mode?
I don't know. I'm not there, and it doesn't sort of tell you on the start screen, so I'm not sure. That information is probably hidden on the internet somewhere, but I've not looked it up. I don't want to ruin it for anybody.
Yeah. When what happens, they don't release any more golf games this year. I'm going to keep just glancing back at that third menu option.
So Golf Club Wasteland is the name of the game here, and yeah, that's kind of fun. I would recommend it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I just remembered I picked up that Everybody's Golf for PS4 a couple weeks ago. I should get around to that. Just add another golf game
so
on the roster.
Me, DJ. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you'll get to it before I do at this rate. Anyway, cool.
Yeah.
The other game I played this week is called Last Stop. It's not The Last Stop, which I have attempted to call it many times. It's just one non-specific last stop. But this is the new adventure game from Variable State, the developers of Virginia, which is another adventure game that came out several years ago, which is like kind of stealthily became one of my favorite games of all time, which is really weird because when I think about how like my reaction to it at the time, I wasn't really blown away by it or anything. Like it was really good. I enjoyed it. But whenever I think back to it, I just think, oh man, what an amazing game that was. That was incredible. I love it so much. There's everything about it. So I don't know why that is, but it just left an impression, I guess.
And you've not replayed it, so your
oh no, I replayed it a couple
fondness
times.
for that one playthrough has kind of grown over time. Oh, you have? Okay, all right.
Yeah. It was very unusual because it was well, there's no dialogue, and there's also like Virginia, just to do 5 minutes on just what this game was about. And it's cut like a movie would be, so you have a lot of interesting like very cinematic, just like scene transitions, and I don't think perspective changes. I think it's all in first person if I remember correctly, or most of it's in first person, but it plays more like, I mean, it almost feels like you're watching a movie rather than playing a game. Yeah. Other than the fact that you're steering your character around in these scenes and occasionally like picking up stuff to inspect. And it was just like a couple hours long, like 2 or 3 hours long. So you could, or every time I've gone through it, I did it all in one setting, like I was watching a movie. Mm-hmm. So just very cool, very unusual game.
Yeah, that's my sort of memory of it. It does lend itself to kind of repeat playthroughs because the time investment is not super intimidating. Is that it's super entertaining and very, very well made and pretty unique in terms of presentation and in gaming. But yeah, it's not this massive like 22-hour experience. You can kind of spend a little bit of time with it and see the whole thing, beginning, middle, and end in a sitting.
Mm-hmm. Plus, the thing that I also just think is so notable about it is it had such this intense momentum as you're playing it, partially due to just the cuts that would take you directly from one critical scene to the next one, but also like the soundtrack has this incredible soundtrack that is just, it really just keeps up the pace the entire time and just kind of moves you from one scene to the next, and you feel like you get to keep pace with it almost. So also very notable, very cool aspect of it.
Now I want to play Virginia.
Yeah, no, I kind of always think like, should I play that game again? It's been a while.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to the last stop. Sorry, I just did it again. This brings us to Last Stop, which they showed, I forget when they debuted this or when I first got wind of it, but they said, oh, hey, it's a new game from Variable State. it's going to be another adventure game, and they started just rolling the trailer. And I was kind of horrified because it looks so different from Virginia. Like, just in appearance as well. Like, Virginia had these very sort of simple character models, very cartoony and stylized. And Last Stop, in contrast, everybody looks like a generation beyond, I guess, how Virginia looked. Like, everybody looks very more realistic, and they have actual, like, facial features. They have, like, people actually speak in this game, and, they're much more animated. It's all in third person this time. It just looks like an incredibly different game. And just watching this trailer, I was just like, oh, I don't think I like this. It doesn't look like, they looks like they took away a lot of the things that I really found interesting and unusual about Virginia. Mm-hmm. Not sure what I think about it.
Well, it's probably like, I don't know, and I'm not sure what like the variable state sort of goal as developers is, but like, do you always want to be the studio that makes the games where nobody talks? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's sort of like your desire to be that thing. I don't know. Yeah, I see sort of like you're like, oh, Virginia was such a cool, unique thing. Just sort of repeat that somehow with different characters or different whatever. I don't know. Kudos to them for branching out, I guess.
Sure. I just felt like they had such a unique thing, and based on the trailer, Last Stop looked like it was much closer to just kind of a standard video game mold than Virginia was. So
it looked like a Telltale game is what the impression I got.
Yes, yeah. And as much as I like those Telltale games, I was just like, oh, this feels like a step back. But anyway, so I still just, I like Virginia so much I had to check this out. It's very similar in that it is, very narrative focused, not a lot of like super video gamey moments. Definitely more than there were in Virginia, at least from what I remember. How it differs, or at least one of the most noticeable ways it differs, is that you have these three characters, or these three separate storylines in Last Stop. They all take place in sort of modern day London, and they're all kind of the different genres slightly. So you have, pausing for a second, I was not sure how much I wanted to like give away in terms of plot details about this game, because a lot of really surprising stuff happens, and of course, I don't want to spoil anything. But a lot of stuff happens very quickly. So I feel like it would be difficult to talk about like whatever goes on in this game without giving away some stuff. And based on the trailers that I watched for this, and based on some of the other previews and reviews I read, I'm going to just probably talk about stuff that happens in the first chapter of each storyline. So, minor spoilers. If you want to go into this completely blind, then just skip past this part. Or skip past the rest of the segment, I guess. But I don't want to do the thing where it's like, and then this thing happens, and this other thing that I can't talk about in detail. But I'm just going to set up like the first chapter in each storyline.
Gotcha.
So like I was saying, you have these three storylines. They're kind of distinct genres. You have this one which centers around this kind of schlubby, like single father, John, who's like trying to raise his daughter. There's this other one where you play as this ruthless sort of, I guess she like works for some kind of government, or like not government, but an independent like defense contractor. And she's like this crazy career woman. And then the third, you just play as you play as one high schooler who's sort of like a delinquent and having family issues at home. And it's weird because they don't really like come together immediately. Everything sort of like intertwines towards the end, but for a lot of the game, they feel very separate. Like they're all doing the same thing, or they're all doing their own thing, and you're kind of left wondering, like, okay, so what is the common thread going to be here? What is what is tying these three storylines together?
Are you promised in some way that they will overlap, or is that just sort of the belief you have going into it, just because you're a video gamer?
I just kind of expect it. Like it opens with a prologue, which is not connected, or not obviously connected to any of them. So you just kind of get the sense that there are like greater things happening in, Last Stop's version of London.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually all these characters are going to intersect with it in one way or another. It's worth mentioning that there, like Virginia, there are a lot of like supernatural or sci-fi elements that take place. So, for instance, in John's storyline, the single father, very early on in the story, you end up doing a body swap with his next door neighbor, who's like this young kind of hipster game developer. So from that point on, his storyline is kind of this like goof on Freaky Friday or whatever, where it's like, oh man, what's the like hip game developer gonna do in this old dude's body, and what's the other guy gonna do about his kid who he has to take to school as this guy wearing like an anime t-shirt, and how does that play out? And that one is kind of just like this goofy comedy storyline almost.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other ones are very interesting. There's like, the defense contractor, Mina, it's not quite a spy story, but you learn that, she's very career focused and neglecting her family at home, and she's like having an affair and trying to cover that up, and there's just all this stuff going on. And then the third storyline is interesting. I was thinking while I was playing this, it's probably like the most mysterious in that I don't really know where it's going. But part of that is because the characters in it just make the most illogical and unbelievable decisions in terms of just how they react to whatever's going on. So basically what happens in this third storyline is you're just, you're the high schooler hanging out with a couple of her friends. You see this mysterious guy who you've been, spotting around town. One of your other friends thinks that, he looks kind of sketchy. So you end up following him. One thing leads to another. And like one of your friends ends up like clocking him over the head with a pipe and knocking him out because they think like he's trying to attack you or something. And then they just hold him captive in this abandoned swimming pool. And just like, okay, so
with no context.
They don't really know who this guy is. Like, he hasn't said anything to them. And, like, the game just resumes at one point, and they got him tied to a chair. And they're basically just taking shifts watching him and trying to figure out what to do. Like, but it's not like they're not really trying to figure out what to do. They're just kind of, like, watching him and, like, waiting for the situation to resolve itself. And they're just like, well, we've been here for a while. Somebody else should go out and get some snacks and supplies, and then we'll just come back and we'll switch shifts. And I'm just like, what is the end game here? Like, what is going to happen? Like, how long have we got this guy trapped in this building? This is very weird. And meanwhile, the other friends will leave, and you're left with the character who you're controlling. And you think, like, okay, so now's our chance to, like, talk to this guy and figure out what's going on, figure out what the deal with him is, because there's some evidence that he has like supernatural powers or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, so if this were me, that would be the thing on the top of my mind, is just like, what's your deal? Why have you got the glowy eyes and all that? But instead she just talks about like, oh yeah, I'm not having a great time at home and that sort of stuff. And I'm just like, why now? Why this and with this guy? And there are just so many moments like that in this third storyline that I found kind of inexplicable. Like why is the story going in this direction?
Right.
And it's crazy because there's so much other, like, the rest of the game, there end up being like these kind of sensational like sci-fi beats that happen. And somehow I found all of that easier to take in than just the conversation topics that she was choosing to get into with this guy who she was like holding at knife point the entire time. It's like, okay, weird. But despite that, despite just the bizarreness of this third storyline, I felt like the rest of the game, and even parts of the third storyline, were pretty well done. They get into some very interesting situations, like with the other two storylines. There are definitely a lot of cliffhanger moments where the episode will actually end and kick you back to the character select screen. You get to pick one of the other ones. I would go, oh no, I want to actually go back and figure out, what was happening with John or what was happening with what's her name. But the way that it's structured is it makes you switch between like all three. So it'll make you do chapter 1 of each character before you can move on to chapter 2 of each one. So that was a little interesting. Very different than the way Virginia was set up, and that you were just sort of in the perspective of the same character throughout the entire thing, at least from what I remember.
I mean, it sounds like much more of a sort of sprawling kind of experience than Virginia as well, as Virginia was very, not necessarily bite-sized, but certainly, as we said, could be sort of enjoyed in a sitting. This feels like a much bigger undertaking. Yeah,
it's definitely like a wider scope than Virginia was. It feels more like it's definitely too long to do in one sitting. It probably took me about 6 or 7 hours to get through the entire thing. But it's divided up very smartly in that, first of all, you have the 3 characters, and then each of their storylines is split into 6 chapters. So, each one, they vary in length, but you can generally get through like an entire set of chapters for all 3 characters in like maybe half an hour or 45 minutes. Or you can just take breaks between, because every time you start one of the new chapters, it'll give you one of those little previously on segments. Which is funny in some cases, because sometimes you would just end up with a chapter that is very short, like 5 or 10 minutes long, and then you would go to continue the next one, and it would still try and give you the previously on, and I was like, oh, I was just there. I don't really need to see it, but whatever. So yeah, very interesting format. Definitely much more ambitious than Virginia. I'm not sure. I mean, I think I still enjoyed just the more minimal structure and just focus that Virginia had over this one.
Right.
But I like that they're doing this sort of thing. It feels more like a little Twilight Zone anthology or something, where you have these storylines that they're kind of thematically connected, and then eventually all the characters do intersect at the end, but leading up to that point they're all kind of these unique, disparate storylines.
Mm-hmm. And without sort of giving anything away, can you say whether or not you found the ending satisfying?
I think yes and no, which is not a helpful answer. But I was satisfied with it.
Okay.
The things the biggest detractors from this game are just how gamey it is at points. Because like with Virginia, it was very guided, and there were not a lot of like little mini games or really decisions that you had to make. With Last Stop, first of all, there are a whole bunch of these little mini games which feel like it's like just the kind of like menial stuff that you were doing in Indigo Prophecy or Heavy Rain or like any of those David Cage games where it's like, oh, I gotta pour the cereal into the bowl. Better, spin the analog stick around. And some of those are used to interesting effect, but a lot of the time they just felt like, like every 15 minutes we got to make them touch a button on the controller or something. A lot of the time it didn't work out for me. And then in a lot of scenes, you actually have to like move the character around, which was true in Virginia as well. But a lot of the scenes in this case will take place during like a conversation, or there will be sort of like the soundtrack will be playing and there's no dialogue and just the characters walking from one scene to the next. And it's very cinematic, or at least it's supposed to be cinematic, because like the camera angle end up changing and you'll end up steering the character into a dead end or like into a barrier, and it just looks like they're having a weird moment on the street where they just like got confused or something.
Oh no.
Or sometimes, this is my favorite thing that would happen, is like in John's scenario, there are a lot of sequences where he's just speaking to Jack, who is his neighbor, as they're going from one scene to the next. And a lot of those times, I didn't realize that I was supposed to be walking them across the screen or wherever. It looked like they were just kind of standing there chatting. And then halfway through, I realized like, oh, we're supposed to be over there by the time this conversation ends. But at that point, it was too late, and they had finished talking. So I would just kind of like walk them across the street in this weird silence. So sometimes it kind of works against the like all the cinematic effort that they've put into this thing. The fact that they're still trying to make it a video game that you control.
You weren't keeping up your part of the walk and talk, DJ.
I'm perfectly content to just hang out and chat, and right. we can go back to the other building whenever we get around to it.
Excellent.
But I mean, nothing that I think completely detracted from the game, but I felt like it was not quite as successful of an experience as Virginia was, just because there's a lot more going on with it. And
right.
A lot of the time, it just doesn't land as well.
Cool. Would you recommend? I feel like I'm on the fence after your review.
I think I enjoyed it, despite just the third storyline, which was preposterous. I mean, I don't know. Probably other people have different levels of tolerance for just how strange and outlandish a character story can get. Right. Maybe that works for some people. I found the other two storylines
identifiable in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the thing, is I just found a lot of the decisions that I think Donna was her name in the third storyline. They were just unbelievable. I could not follow the reasoning for what she was doing from one scene to the next. But the other two were very good. I really enjoyed sort of the spy story, and the body swap story ended up in a very interesting place. And I don't want to get into more details because I don't want to give too much away. But
cool.
I'm not sure if I should elaborate on what I found unsatisfying about the ending, because
you probably should not.
That in itself would probably be kind of a giveaway. But so I don't want to do that. Yeah. But no, overall, I had a good time with it. I'm glad they put this out. It's not quite at the level of Virginia on my list, but I'm still glad to see some more stuff come out of this developer. Yeah.
Maybe as time goes by, you will look back more fondly upon it.
Well, oh yeah, who knows? Maybe. I don't know. It never. I don't think it quite hit that level, but it was pretty cool, pretty different from a lot of games out there.
Yeah. I mean, I really I like Virginia a lot. I really admire it. I think I kind of forgot how much I enjoyed it until we started talking about it on this episode, and I was like, yeah, it was a really good game. But so yeah, I'm curious to sort of see what else that developer kind of has up their sleeve. So I'm curious. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe next time it'll be 5 characters, and they'll be real filmed people. Who knows? Not sure. Maybe
it's a very trendy thing, right?
Be pixel characters. Yeah. I don't know.
Cool. Right.
Anyway, that is Last Stop. It's out on pretty much everything except for mobile, I believe. So that's also very cool. You can play it just about anywhere.
It's on the Xbox Game Pass.
Oh, it is. Oh, terrific.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right. Excellent. Let's wrap this thing up. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com as well. We would love for you to join us on Discord to hang out with us and talk about video games and things. You can get a link to that over at VGHangover.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on all of your podcast devices and websites and portals and things and apps. Where else can you get podcasts? That's probably it.
Oh, all over the place. They're just
have I covered
can't
all things?
Avoid them.
Just falling out of the sky. Sidetrack. I've been watching this show, Only Murders in the Building, with Steve Martin and Martin Short.
Okay. Why is it always those guys?
They're buddies. They like each other. And they live in a very posh New York City apartment complex when one of their neighbors gets murdered. And they're big, the two of them are big crime podcast buffs.
Oh, great.
So they decide to take advantage of this situation where a neighbor has gotten murdered and to make their own podcast.
Oh, sure.
So I'm just fact-checking the whole podcast process. And really just, I have to assume this television show is made by people who have never heard or made a podcast before.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
Maybe they should bring you on as a consultant.
Right, exactly. I'll take that paycheck.
Yeah.
I think I would do it for free to hang out with Martin Short, actually.
There's also, incidentally, a podcast. One of the characters in Last Stop does a podcast at one point, and he even does an ad for a Razer subscription service. So it's like, okay, these guys, this is the other side of the spectrum. They definitely have heard a podcast or two in their time.
Dollar Shave Club has to get their pound of flesh, so.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, on a related note, review us, subscribe to us on any place where you can get a podcast, and help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Incidentally, Dollar Shave Club is never going to sponsor this show now that you have used their name and also pound of flesh in the same sentence. So, great.
Wait till you hear what I think about Audible.
Anyway, tell your friends about the show. We already said that.
Yeah,
helps us get the word out, helps us bring in more listeners. It helps everybody, mostly us, but it trickles down.
It certainly does not help Audible or Dollar Shave Club. So,
no.
Yep.
Anyway, we want to give special thanks again to Hal Binderman this week for our intro and outro music. It would be great if you headed on over to heavyviper.bandcamp.com. Maybe buy an album or 2 or 3, or just buy all of them. That would be very nice of you.
Absolutely.
That would help.
Let's help out Hal Binderman.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. All right, we'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.